Hello, everybody. It is October 13th, 2021. Today's afternoon devotional and Bible study. We will be talking about the fall of Jerusalem. That's right. We're talking about 2 Kings chapter 25, the last chapter of 2 Kings. So we've made it through 1st and 2 Kings after today, which is kind of cool, kind of exciting. Looking forward to doing that. One more book off of the 66 that we need to do. I'm still not 100% sure exactly what we'll be doing next. But I might be, I have a couple ideas for things I want to pre-record that I want to be shot kind of cool. And they're going to be kind of a little bit more lesson-y than just reading. So, I don't know if you have any ideas on stuff that you would like me to cover, or even if there's like a Halloween theme that you want me to cover leading up to Halloween, let me know. But anyways, before we do any of that, before we jump in and finish the book of 2 Kings, we're going to read the devotional Jesus is Calling for today, October 13th. Take time to be still in my presence. The more hassled you feel, the more you need this sacred space of communion with me. Breathe slowly and deeply. Relax in my holy presence while my face shines upon you. This is how you receive my peace, which I always proffer to you. Imagine the pain I feel when my children tie themselves in anxious knots, ignoring my gift of peace. I died a criminal's death to secure this blessing for you. Receive it gratefully. Hide it in your heart. My peace, is an inner treasure growing within you as you trust me. Therefore, circumstances cannot touch it. Be still, enjoying peace in my presence. Now, I was inspired by 3 different sections of the Bible. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. Psalm 46:10. The Lord made his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turned his face toward you and give you peace. Numbers 6:25-26. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give you as the world gives. I do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. John 14:27. This is actually a message that I needed today. When I went to get my coffee, I decided to step into Tim Hortons, and some guy walked in not wearing a mask, and they're like, hey, you need a mask. He's like, I'm not wearing one. And they're like, yeah, I know, we can give you one. And then he's like, I'm not doing that. For like a 3-minute thing, I'm going to go pick up a coffee and leave, and then you got to stress people out. And then he walked really close up to me. I was like, dude, back up. He's like, what did you say? And I just grabbed my food and left. But even the other customers were like, oh, man, I don't know. It was frustrating, and I was kind of angry. I was angry as I was walking here. I was like, God, please calm my heart. Please calm my heart. Don't let me be distracted by this. And then it's like, let God's peace kind of surround you. Take those deep breaths. Because I'm still really upset at that dude. And I kind of walked out because I didn't want to explode and make everyone's day that much worse. Anyways. Let God's peace surround us. But yeah. Alright, so now I invite you guys to open up your Bibles to 2 Kings chapter 25, the last book in the book of Kings. So a really, really quick recap of the book of 1st and 2nd Kings is Israelites wanted to have a king like all the other kingdoms, and God was like, well, you have me. And they're like, yeah, but we need a person to lead us. We need a king and a kingdom. And God finally was like, fine, if that's really what you want, then I'll give you guys a king. And he starts off with Saul, who started off really good, but then he let that kind of power corrupt him. I just realized that. That's going to bug me. All right. And he let that kind of power corrupt him. And then you had David come up, and then God was like, yes, David, you're going to be the next king. And there was a bunch of like back and forth as Saul was trying to kill David. David ended up surviving, became the next king, and he led Israel really well. And through that, there was good kings and bad kings that did what God wanted, and other kings that ended up introducing other gods. And that started off with the third king, Saul. He ended up marrying like 700 women and brought these other false gods into the land. And from then on, there was a division between the northern and southern kingdoms. And yeah, it was like, we're doing bad, we're doing bad, we're doing good. We're doing bad, we're doing bad, we're doing bad, we're doing good. We're doing bad, we're doing bad, we're doing good. Throughout the whole book of First and Second Kings. And there was two prophets that we got to see their story and how they defended God and how they led Israel despite having really bad kings and leadership. And then there was after Elijah and Elisha died, there was another prophet that they talked about, Isaiah, which is pretty cool. Generations came and went, and then the last good king found some of the scrolls from the earlier kings, because it's been generations at this point in time. It's been so many years. They found these scrolls and they're like, oh, we're not following what God asked us to do. We need to make a lot of corrections. And they started making a bunch of corrections. And then there was a prophecy that he received as, cool, there's going to be peace, because he thought his kids were going to continue on their path. But instead they turned from God and they started leading Israel down the path that they had come through. And now this prophecy of Babylon taking over Jerusalem is knocking at the door, and that's where our story continues today. So, I'm going to have a little bit more coffee. Let God's peace come over me. Take that deep breath that we just talked about. And let's jump in to the book of 2 Kings, chapter 25. Zedek rebelled against the king of Babylon. So on January 15th, during the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon led his entire army against Jerusalem. They surrounded the city and built siege ramps against its walls. Jerusalem was kept under siege until the 11th year of King Zedekiah's reign. By July 18th, in the 11th year of Zedekiah's reign, the famine of the city had become very severe, and the last of the food was entirely gone. Then a section of the city wall was broken down, since the city was surrounded by the Babylonians. The soldiers waited for nightfall and escaped through the gate between the two walls behind the king's garden. Then he headed toward the Jordan River. But the Babylonian troops chased the king and overtook him on the plains of Jericho, for his men had all deserted him and scattered. They captured the king and took him to the king of Babylon at Riblah, where they pronounced judgment upon Zedekiah. They made Zedekiah watch as they slaughtered his sons. Then they gouged out Zedekiah's eyes and bound him in bronze chains and led him away to Babylon. The temple destroyed. On the On August 14th of that year, which was the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Nebuchadnezzar, the captain of the guard and the official of Babylonian king, arrived in Jerusalem. He burned down the temple of the Lord, the royal palace, and all the houses of Jerusalem. He destroyed the important buildings in the city. Then he supervised the entire Babylonian army as they tore down the walls of Jerusalem on every side. Then Nebuchadnezzar, the captain of the guard, took as exiles the rest of the people who remained in the city, the defectors who had declared their allegiance to the king of Babylon, and the rest of the population. But the captain of the guard allowed some of the poorest people to stay behind, to care for the vineyards and the fields. The Babylonians broke up the bronze pillars in front of the Lord's temple, the bronze water carts, and the great bronze basin called the sea. And they carried all the bronze away to Babylon. They also took all the ash buckets, shovels, lamp snuffers, ladles, and all the other bronze articles used for making sacrifices at the temple. The captain of the guard also took the incense burners and basins, and all the other articles made of pure gold or silver. The weight of bronze and the two pillars of the sea, the water carts and the water carts was too great to be measured. These things had been made for the Lord's temple in the days of Solomon. Each of the pillars was 27 feet tall, and the bronze capital on top of each pillar was 7.5 feet high, and was decorated with a network of bronze pomegranates all the way around. The Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, took with him as prisoner Sarah, the high priest, Zephaniah, and the priests of the second rank, and the 3 chief gatekeepers. And from among the people still hiding in the city, he took an officer who had been in charge of the Judean army, 5 of the king's personal advisors, the army commander-in-chief secretary, who was in charge of recruitment, and 60 other citizens. Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, took them all to the king of Babylon at Riblah. And there at Riblah, the land of Hamath, the king of Babylon had them all put to death. So the people of Judah were sent into the exile of their land. Gedaliah governs in Judah. Then King Nebuchadnezzar appointed Gedaliah, son of Hakim, the grandson of Sephron, as governor over the people he had left in Judah. When all the army commanders and their men learned that the king of Babylon had appointed Gedaliah as governor, they went to see him at Mizpah. This included Ishmael, son of Nethaniah, Joanna, son of Caretha, Sariah, son of Tenhumetha, and Netophatheli, Jezreiah, son of Machathite, and all their men. Gedaliah vowed to them that Babylonian officials meant them no harm. Don't be afraid of them. Live in the land and serve the king of Babylon, and all will go well for you, he promised. But at mid-autumn of that year, Ishmael, son of Nethaniah, the grandson of Elishama, who was a member of the royal family, went to Mizpah. With 10 men, he killed Gedaliah. He also killed the Judeans and the Babylonians who were with him at Mizpah. And then all the people of Judah, from the least to the greatest, as well as the army commanders, fled in panic to Egypt. They were afraid of what the Babylonians would do to them. Hope for Israel's royal line. In the 37th year of exile, of the king of Jeroboam of Judah, evil Murdoch ascended to the Babylonian throne. He was king of Jeroboam and released him from prison April 2nd of that year. He spoke kindly to Jeroboam and gave him a higher place than all the other exiled kings in Babylon. He supplied Jeroboam with new clothes to replace his prison garb, and allowed him to dine in the king's presence for the rest of his life. So the king gave him a regular food allowance as long as he lived. May God add a blessing to the reading of his word. All right, so there's one section in here that refers to blue, that's written in blue, so it refers to something in the New Testament that's connected with Jesus. 2 Kings 25:9. He burned down the temple of the Lord, the royal palace, and all the houses of Jerusalem. He destroyed all the important buildings. Here, the temple of God is destroyed by the Babylonians king Nebuchadnezzar. Later, Jesus speaks from the Temple Mount, telling the Jews that if they destroyed this temple, in 3 days I will rise it up. After his resurrection, the disciples realized that he was referencing himself with this command. John 2:13-22. So there's some significance too, like, especially as they get into all the details on how, like, this temple was built to show for a place to dwell amongst them. There was, like, all of that, and then there's these royal practices and decrees and all of that jazz. And so not only did their home get destroyed, but the thing that housed their God got destroyed. And it can seem pretty helpless. And so this tearing down of the temple, as it ends, as 2 Kings ends, it seems almost hopeless. Everything is gone. Everything is destroyed. We're done. What's the point? We've lost literally everything. They've taken all the gold, all the silver, everything. What's the point? It's all done. And then there's two slivers of hope in this. One, the former King Jeroboam, who had been a political prisoner, and how he gets to wine and dine and speak to the king of their oppressors, even though he is, still, I guess, a prisoner. And then you have the poor people that got left behind, that the Babylonian king was like, you're poor and you're beneath me, watch the gardens, get your food, I don't need you, you can stay here and you can do this, look after the gardening, look after yourselves, and then kind of, leaves them to be. So I think that's actually really cool, because later on, Jesus goes out of his way to look after the poor. And in our society today, there's a lot of like, whatever, you are less than. But not with God. Not with God. And Jesus turns that whole thing upside down. He does preach and he does minister to the rich. And he's usually a little bit more confrontational with them. Because especially the rich Christians are Jewish people at the time, calling them like a pit of vipers and so on and so forth. But with the poor, he just loved on them, and he guided them and directed them. He stood up for them. Even the criminals on the cross, he reaches out to and ministers to them and lets them know that they are loved and that they can be forgiven if they choose it. So you see that heart of God come through, and we know that that's one of the things that he does, and that's going to come through. But the king of Babylon was like, whatever. So there's that warning. Don't be like the king of Babylon, because you know what? Israel still had a hope because of them, and because of Jeroboam, but also because of the remnant that were left behind, that were scattered, but look after these fields. So I think that's really cool. Even if the world looks down on you, even if your family looks down on you, if your best friends look down upon you, if you look down on yourself, God can still use you. You are not without value, and the world is better with you in it. The world is better with you in it. And God has plans even when you think that you are worthless. God has worth for you. That's one of the big things that I got out of this chapter. And two, things seemed absolutely hopeless. Jerusalem fell, the temple got destroyed, all the religious relics got pulled or burned and destroyed. Hope is gone. They lost their God. But they didn't. They just had a limited understanding on who God was. And we know that God was not done yet because I'm talking to you about him today, like 3,000 years after this all happened. I'm talking to you today after Jerusalem fell, 3,000 years later. We're still talking about that God. He was not done. Even when things seem hopeless, like all hope is lost, we can find our hope in God. Even if we don't understand what he's doing or why he's doing it, we can find our hope in God. And the third thing is there are consequences to our actions. There was a lot of really, really bad kings. And they kept on choosing to do what was evil in the Lord's sight. And eventually they lost their homes. They lost their temple. There are consequences for our actions. And usually those consequences aren't great. Let us pray. AJC, awesome Jesus Christ. Thank you very much that there's a roof over my head right now as it's raining, that I could find that one last place and that one last angle to do all 25 chapters in a different location. Lord, I thank you for that. And Lord, I pray and I lift up those who are feeling worthless, that are feeling less than, that are feeling looked down upon and like they have no value, no purpose. Lord, I thank you that you use what kings look down upon. You use those that seem absolutely worthless, and you just made it that much more prominent with Jesus, how much you care and you love those who even struggle to love themselves. Lord, when we feel like all hope is lost, may we turn to you and find hope in you, Lord. And when we start realizing the consequences to our actions, let us not double down on our wrongness, but help us to turn to you for direction and guidance and wisdom and knowledge. Thank you very much, Lord. Amen. All right. Well, I'm not 100% sure what we'll be reading tomorrow, but we will be reading tomorrow. Thank you guys so much once again for coming out, joining me in this journey through the book of 2 Kings as part of the larger journey through the whole book of the Bible, one chapter at a time. Have a great day. God bless.